Advaita says enlightenment can be obtained through philosophy. Not that you can argue your way to enlightenment, but you can come very, very close to it.
How rational can spirituality get? I met Swami Sarvapriyananda, one of the world's leading teachers of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual philosophy rooted in Hinduism that puts self-inquiry and rational thinking so much at the center that it irritated more devotional schools of Hinduism.
The yogis would charge us with, you guys talk a lot, but you don't meditate enough, you don't have these experiences. Do you even believe in the deities? Do you take a dip in the holy Ganges? And our answer was yes, we do all of that, except that we don't think it's the end. There is an ultimate reality, which is the reality of all things in the universe. Where is it? What's it? It's you.
According to Advaita Vedanta, reality is fundamentally a projection of consciousness that itself remains untouched by the images because it is the screen.
Wherever the movie is, the screen is there. And in fact, the screen is the reality, not the pictures or what's happening on the movie at the level of appearance. Whatever your level of suffering, all the time, this non-dual reality is available for you, untouched by the story of the movie. In the midst of suffering, there is peace.
According to Advaita Vedanta, our individual selves, Jiva, equal the divine, Shiva. And out of this, the tradition derives its ethics.
Worship Shiva by serving Jiva. My God the poor, my God the sick, my God the hungry, my God the ignorant, my God the wicked. The biggest questions which human beings have. What is real? How do we know anything? And what's the point of it all? Notice there's one answer for all of these. A simple insight that...
Before we go, allow me one short message. The Essentia Foundation exists to share with the world that consciousness is fundamental in our universe. It's our essence, our essentia. This worldview is known as non-dualism or idealism, and not only is it more compatible with modern science, it also gives deep meaning to our lives.
Once you decide that you're going to find out, the world will present you the next step to do.
We are a non-profit that relies on donations, and your membership would really help us to continue and grow this channel. Now, we've created 2 tiers of memberships with a special surprise in the second one, something we've been building and working on for quite a while, namely the Essentia app, a knowledge hub that unlocks all our videos and essays with an AI-powered search engine that directly leads you to clips around a specific topic and lets you discover links between all the scientists that have appeared on our platform. If you want to discover more, hit the join button below. But whether you become a member or not, I really want to thank you for watching our videos and for all the love that we've been receiving for the last couple of years. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I really hope you enjoy the following conversation. I have the great pleasure and honor of sitting down with Swami Sarvapriyananda. A very warm welcome, Swamiji.
Thank you, Hans. Wonderful to be here. I've watched some of your videos online, so I didn't know I would be actually participating in one.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. Just for our audience who do not know you, I think many will know you, but just a brief introduction. You're one of the world's leading teachers in Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dual spiritual tradition rooted in Hinduism, mainly concerned with the Upanishads, which contain great sayings that are very similar to analytic idealism, namely that Brahman is consciousness and that fundamentally we are that consciousness. So I think it's just very interesting to explore all of that with you. And you are head of the Vedanta Society of New York, and I just find it amazing to see your reach online with your videos, your lectures, your Q&As reaching so many people. And I think not only because of your knowledge of Hindu philosophy and modern science, but also your gift to explain it and translate it into modern day language, inspiring people worldwide, and how to bring it into practice also. So I just think that's really great. So it's my honor to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. I think we are just lucky to be alive at this particular time when this amazing technology, which has connected the world, and it has become a vessel for spreading wonderful ideas, including Vedantic ideas, so easily across the world.
So it can be part of a yogic practice to do podcasting in that sense.
Yes. I remember Swami Vivekananda, who founded the Vedanta Society of New York and was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, a very noted central figure in spirituality in India in the late 19th century. Swami Vivekananda said that whenever the world has been knit together, maybe by empires in the past, the Roman Empire, the Islamic Empire, and then finally the British Empire in 19th century, 18th, 19th century, Indian ideas have spread out across these connections. And now we have the empire of the internet. So these ancient ideas developed in part in the Indian subcontinent thousands of years ago. They have a new virtual life in the 21st century.
They do. And I'd like to start a bit personal. I've read you come from a pious family and had a spiritual inclination from a very young age on, but you also pursued a more worldly education, obtaining an MBA. Mm-hmm. And you write about the moment that after those studies, instead of pursuing sort of the worldly path of becoming a business leader and maybe earning a lot of money and worldly success, you chose, of course, the monastic path. And to quote you from your book, someone asked you, are you mad? Why are you giving up all these pleasures? Don't you want anything? To which you then replied, no, I want everything. Mm-hmm. I found that such a profound answer, and I wanted to ask you what led you to that decision, and also just what you mean exactly by that answer, that you pursued everything by becoming a monk.
Yes, that's a good question. In fact, the interesting thing is that doing that MBA was actually part of on my journey to becoming a monk, not the other way around.
All right.
What happened was, as a kid, growing up in that family, and it helps to be in India, I guess, where there are multiple living spiritual traditions. Even being monks is not unknown. It's part of society. You know, there always have been spiritual practitioners and yogis and monks. So as a child, I remember reading these books, especially by Swami Vivekananda and by others also. And I was lucky enough to be maybe part of the last generation before cable TV, certainly before the internet. So we had books to entertain ourselves. And I thought, if God realization is possible, if spiritual realization, enlightenment is possible, then that should be my goal in life. If I do what my parents did, my uncles and aunts did, my life will be something like that, maybe a little better, a little worse. So why not do this, which if it is real, then this is the most worthwhile thing to do. So very early on, I decided to be a monk, but I had to finish my education. And it so happened, as in the monastery near our house, a senior monk who was visiting, he encouraged me, but he said, look, you're young. You finish your studies, you earn a little bit of money and see how your mind behaves when you're independent and you have got money in your hand. Would you still want to give it up? I thought, all right, that sounds wise. And I thought, how do I get money very quickly so that I can give it up very quickly? And I didn't even know what an MBA was until somebody told me there's this new thing called an MBA. It wasn't new, but it was new for us in India at that time. And if you do that, you will earn a lot of money very quickly. So I thought, okay, that's what I have to do. And I did it. And I did earn a little bit of money just before giving it all up. I didn't even have to get a job afterwards because, in the MBA, in the summers, you do an internship in companies. So that's when I got a sort of experience of doing a job and earning a little bit of money. And then I gave it up. So it was an MBA on the way to becoming a monk.
That's a very interesting career path. And
if I go back to what you asked about everything.
Everything.
A friend asked, why do you want to give up all this? I said, I'm not giving up just something. I want everything. By everything, I mean, what I understood from Vedanta intuitively is, it's looking us at the heart of reality, the reality of everything. The question which comes up in Vedanta again and again is, what is that by knowing which you know everything? And that one thing. And that's how the pursuit of spirituality is understood in Vedanta. So that's what I meant, that, I'm not giving up anything. I want it all, not just a part of it. Yeah, to be one with the universe, if you want to use cliches. But Vedanta says it's entirely possible. And it's, in fact, even more amazingly, it's already a fact. We have to uncover it.
That, of course, touches on the key ontology of Advaita Vedanta, in which, of course, the notion of Brahman is very important. I think many people have heard of it, but we need sort of stories and metaphors to really understand it. And I very much liked in your latest book how you describe it in a story of a boy and a father going to the cinema. And the story is, of course, about how we ourselves find us in a world of appearances, you could say a cinema, and we are identified with the images on the screen, but that is not the reality of the cinema. Could you tell us that story and how it points to sort of also the difficulty of grasping what Brahman is?
Yes. When I first heard it, it also struck me. I was fascinated by that analogy. And it's not, of course, not a traditional example. A traditional example would be the clay pot or, gold and ornaments or the water and waves, things like that. But I heard it from a traditional wandering monk. His name was Ramananda Saraswati. He has passed away several years ago. And he talks about a little boy who's taken by his father to a cinema hall to watch his first cinema. And on the way, the father explains what a cinema is. There is a screen on which pictures are projected, and there's sound, and the story is told. And so they enter, and when they enter the hall, it's dark, and the movie has already started. We basically enter into life when it's already started, so there's already a movie. There are parents, and there is the society around us and everything. And we already have a body. And the boy at first becomes very absorbed in the movie, as we do in life, and then starts asking questions, as we do after some time. What's it all about? And so the boy asks, where's the screen? You told me about the screen. Where's the screen? And the father whispers, there, in front of you. That's the screen. But he says, and here I sort of visualize it as the famous scene in Mahabharata, maybe, where Krishna is teaching Arjuna in the middle of the battlefield. He says, there in front, you mean Krishna and Arjuna? No, behind them. Behind them, the chariot. No, behind it all. Oh, you mean the battlefield and the sky? And the father says, no, what I mean is, if you remove it all. Oh, you mean the screen is nothing? No, I mean, that's all of it. Oh, the screen is the warriors and the chariots and the elephants and the sky and the earth. Now the monk said, how will the father point out the screen? Because wherever he's pointing to, there's a picture. And the child looks at the picture. The boy looks at the picture and thinks, that's what you're talking about. And if you say, no, ignore the picture. It's what's behind the picture, or that on which the picture is projected. If you say ignore the picture, then the child doesn't see anything except the picture. So he thinks it's nothing. But the screen is that on which the entire movie takes place. Wherever the movie is, the screen is there. And in fact, the screen is the reality, not the pictures or what's happening on the movie at the level of appearance. And that's a good example, a modern example to explain what Brahman is. Whatever we experience, there's a foundational reality right here. And in Vedanta, that is called Brahman. What is Brahman? It is characterized as existence itself. The screen is existence itself. And further, consciousness itself, and even bliss itself. Look at it this way. It struck me about a couple of years ago that the foundational questions in philosophy are what is real? And the branch of philosophy which deals with that is ontology. The second question is, how do you know these things? Whether God is real, or heaven is real, or the world is real, or minds are real, is matter real? How do you know these things? So the branch of philosophy which deals with this is called epistemology. And then finally we have a number of other fields which are clubbed together. There's a new name for it, axiology, the science of values, study of values. So aesthetics, then ethics, What is right, what is wrong, what is good, what's the point of life, what is beautiful, what is worth having, all of them together, axiology. Now these big questions, the biggest questions which human beings have, what is real, how do we know anything, and what's the point of it all?
Yeah.
And now if you come back to Vedanta, notice there's one answer for all of these. You may agree or disagree with that answer, but the answer is bold and it's fresh and it's ancient and it's very direct. Ontology, what is real? In Vedanta, it is existence itself. Existence, being, the Sanskrit word is sat. Not existing things, but existence. How do we know anything? How is knowledge possible? How is experience possible? And the Sanskrit word for that is chit, consciousness. And ananda, bliss, that's the point of it all. So here you have three questions, the ontological question, the epistemological question, and the axiological question. And the Vedantic answers are sat, pure being, chit, consciousness itself, and ananda or bliss itself. And Vedanta goes further and says, these three are not three, but they are one. There is an ultimate reality, which is the reality of all things in the universe, like the screen of the movie. Wherever you find existence, existing things, that's sat, it's there. It's also, that very thing is also what we experience as consciousness in sentient beings. And in its real nature, it's what we are all searching for. It's what gives value or point to life. Even morality or ethics can be drawn from it. So it's one reality, and it's called Brahman, and the word Brahman just means the vast. It's not the name of a Hindu god. Although later on, there would be any number of divine figures which represented Brahman. But Brahman, the original term in the Upanishads, in the original texts, is very philosophical. It just means the unlimited, the vast. And Vedanta goes further and claims this Brahman, you ask, where is it? What's it? It's you.
It's right here.
It's right here, and it is you. It is everything, but also, very interestingly, it is you, and Vedanta would like you to focus on yourself in order to discover that. And if you did discover it, you would know the secret of all reality, what this universe is. You would know the secret of all experience and knowledge, and you would have that which you are looking for in life, the answer to the axiological question.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is a very elaborative answer and a great answer. And it makes me, there's so many follow-up questions. One I have, I think in particular interesting to our audience is, I've interviewed many physicists, and what I find super fascinating is now how, of course, modern day physics is arriving at many metaphysical insights that are known for thousands of years in Hinduism and Advaita Vedanta. And one of them is, of course, that the world of appearances, the movie on the screen in the story you just told, we know that those images are not fundamental because we know in measurement that physicality, a world which we can measure and has shape and form, only presents itself when we look in that screen. And of course, what projects and how the projection takes place, that's the big question in physics. It's called the measurement problem. So I'm just super curious how you look at quantum mechanics, how it sort of is similar to Advaita Vedanta in where it points to metaphysically, but also where Vedanta can enrich sort of where physics is now sort of hitting a wall.
Yes.
Sorry for the big...
No, but you're right. It's something that I've been trying to avoid, but I can't avoid it. The reason I try to avoid the whole issue of quantum theory is because I'm not trained in it. It's not my field, and it's a very sophisticated field, cutting-edge physics. You'd be surprised at the number of monks who are physicists by training. I know a few who are PhDs in physics. I think what drives them to the monastic life, those few who are monks, is the same quest which drove them to fundamental physics in the first place, to particle physics or to cosmology. This quest to know the reality of this universe, the ultimate, the answers to the ultimate questions. Yes, but from what little I've read about quantum theory, and that is just, now there are a plethora of books trying to introduce it to lay people like us. First thing which strikes me is the founders of quantum theory. They were almost to a man all fascinated by Vedanta. That is very, very interesting. Oppenheimer, of course, he was. He loved the Bhagavad Gita. He called it the greatest philosophical song written in any language. He actually learned Sanskrit and read it. He learned Sanskrit in Berkeley as a student. And he read the Gita in the original. He knew verses in the original Sanskrit. And he would, in fact, at one stage in his life, he would hand out copies of the Gita to friends. And he had a small library which would always travel with him. And the Gita would always be part of that. Yes.
Yeah, no, just sorry. He quoted, I remember that famous fragment where he quotes the Bhagavad Gita, now I've become the destroyer of worlds.
Now I come time, the destroyer of worlds, and also the explosion of the atom bomb, with as if 1,000 suns rose in the sky.
Yes.
That's in the Gita, 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But also Heisenberg, Schrödinger, they were not only aware, they read Vedanta. They talked about it among themselves and to others also. So they found a resonance there. To whatever extent they studied Vedanta, they found a resonance. Not just Vedanta. On the other hand, Buddhism. There is the quantum theorist Carlo Rovelli today, who writes in his book Helgoland that he was asked, have you read Nagarjuna, what you speak about that seems similar to what Nagarjuna said? And he says, who's this Nagarjuna? I'd better read Nagarjuna. And he finds out that Nagarjuna was this monk, a philosopher, who lived nearly 2,000 years ago in ancient India. And when Rovelli read the translation of the root verses of the Middle Way, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he says, I was fascinated to discover that this Buddhist monk and philosopher who lived nearly 2,000 years ago, through sheer philosophical inquiry, not that he knew quantum theory, he didn't, but through sheer philosophical inquiry, he comes to a worldview which is extraordinarily, reminiscent or like an echo or like a mirror image of what what quantum theory is telling us about the nature of the world, this interdependent existence. So, yes, that is an interesting aspect. These are two areas of great interest today. One, as you said, in science, in quantum theory, the ultimate nature of physical reality. We are running up into consciousness there. Somebody wrote that I found a new entrant into physics, fundamental physics conferences in the last 30 years, and most unexpected presence, and that's consciousness.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect it to be. You think consciousness is a high-level emergent phenomenon, after you have living beings, brains, so it's something to do with physiology, neuroscience, brain science, and then consciousness. But when you're talking about quantum theory, the very building blocks of the universe, how does consciousness come in there? So that's one area, and the other area, of course, today, again, very hot, is consciousness studies itself. And if you look at these two, and you see the central teaching of Advaita Vedanta is you are that. You meaning bare consciousness itself, that meaning bare existence itself, are one and the same thing. And so the fundamental thing which Advaita Vedanta could contribute, in principle, to this debate would be, what is the nature of consciousness? What is the nature of existence? And most stunning is that Advaita Vedanta projects or predicts you will come to the same answer in both.
I think that in the West, we concocted the whole subject-object divide philosophically, though interesting to mention that it is also part of Hindu philosophical history, like dualist traditions. But now, as physics indeed, as you say, point to the fact that those appearances are not fundamental, we are still so much attached to the screen of perception, so to speak, the appearances, physicality, that we find it hard to just explore the fact that maybe consciousness might be fundamental. And now the richness of your tradition is, of course, to say, if you start there, things become a lot easier. You can sort of tell the story of reality better. But there are, of course, a big question still. One for me has to do on a meaning level. When we think of Sat Chit Ananda, right, the being, consciousness, and bliss. Especially that notion of bliss. The movie of life, getting back to the cinema metaphor, just for people to understand, is of course has pleasure and joy, but it also has pain, sickness, natural disasters, or sometimes just pure horror by the violence we inflict upon each other. And a critique many people have on non-dualism and idealism is that, what is your answer there? Because if it's all consciousness and there's a universal mind that is inflicting all of this on us, what does that tell us about nature? And how can you call that bliss? So I was very curious on your answer here, and also how to define bliss and ananda to better understand this.
This is what is called the problem of evil in religion, in theology. So one form of this question is, in religion, it would be, if this so-called God exists, why is there so much suffering in the world? There is tremendous amount of suffering in the natural world and in the human world. Part of it is natural suffering, just the way the life is. It feeds on life itself. There's tremendous violence in nature. Then there is the very way our bodies are designed, where there's possibility of a lot of pain and disease, and finally old age and death inevitable for everybody. Somebody said life is the name of a disease with 100% fatality rate. So it seems to be designed to produce suffering. What does non-duality say here? In fact, I think non-duality has the answer. Non-duality does not shy away from confronting the suffering. It admits to all the suffering, and this is just the way nature is. Some of it can be avoided. Some of it is human suffering, which is avoidable, inflicted by human beings on others, prompted by our baser instincts, our nature. However, what non-duality says is that in the midst of this suffering, more fundamental than this, is a non-dual reality where we can find security, peace, and safety from that suffering, and transcendence of suffering. I like the word transcendence. It doesn't mean that all the suffering will be cured forever, some kind of a heaven idea where there won't be any suffering at all. That just doesn't seem possible. But even whatever your level of suffering, all the time this non-dual reality is available for you. The screen of the movie is available for you, no matter what the characters in the movie are undergoing. Behind them, the screen is there, untouched by the story of the movie. And each of the characters is actually that screen, appearing as the characters in the story. And this is not just theoretical. This has been shown again and again and again to work. Sri Ramakrishna, to take a clear example, maybe the most powerful, extraordinary spiritual figure in 19th century India. He died of throat cancer in 1886. And just a few months before his death, when he was already emaciated with cancer in the throat, one of his disciples, who became a monk in the future, this young man comes and asks him in the morning, "How are you today, sir?" And Sri Ramakrishna, bedridden, he says, "I can't eat, this hurts." And this young man, we don't know what he saw, he looked at Sri Ramakrishna and said, "But sir, I see that you are in great bliss." Now that's a strange thing to say to a cancer patient, a terminal cancer patient who's suffering terribly and dying of it. But what's even more strange is Sri Ramakrishna's reaction. He laughs and he says, "Oh, the rascal has found me out." That means you have seen through it. He admits that there is great bliss right here. Now, he's not acting. It's not that he's not feeling the tumor, the pain, the slow degeneration of the body, but he sees the screen, the reality beneath, or the foundational reality. From that perspective, he says, "I am in great bliss." And that's what non-duality does for us. It shows us in the midst of death, these bodies will die. No matter, even the most spiritual of people throughout the ages, the most powerful, the most learned, the richest, the most spiritual, they all died. So the bodies will die, no matter how enlightened one is. The minds fluctuate all the time, no matter how enlightened one is. An enlightened person's mind might be much superior to our, chaotic minds, but still it's a mind. and it is affected by the vagaries of the body also. But what the tradition and those who have walked down this path, what they say is, there is a foundational spiritual reality. Call it Brahman or Atman, the Buddha nature, or in dualistic, theistic religions, God or the divine, and we have access to it. If one can find that out and be centered in it, then one can face this suffering. Then one would be able to say with Sri Ramakrishna and with mystics and spiritual people in all traditions throughout the ages that in the midst of suffering, there is peace. There is a place of spiritual reality, which is not a small thing. It's a really big thing. It's, in fact, in some senses, more real than this suffering. So it's not to deny the suffering.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
It accepts the suffering as it is. And this is, what is the solution? One solution would be at the level of suffering. Physical suffering, medicine and care. Economic suffering, try to make a better economy, more jobs and wealth and all that. Political suffering, law and order and police and all that, and courts and all of this, a civil society, modern science, technology. If you permit me, at this point I always love to tell the story of the two arrows. The Buddha was once asked by one of his monks, and this is not a new internet story, but it's actually from the original Pali sources. One of the monks asked the Buddha, I have a question, that you taught us that there is suffering and there's a way out of suffering, and we are following your teachings. You taught us that suffering is old age, disease, death. But we who are following your teachings, we are becoming older. And we get sick and we suffer physically. And some of us have died, and I guess all of us will die. And what's even more worse is you are getting older. You get sick sometimes. And I guess, unfortunately, you will die too. So how did you overcome suffering? Your teachings, which is supposed to help us to overcome suffering, you are enlightened, you are supposed to have overcome suffering, but it's there. And then the Buddha explains, he says, the nature of suffering is like a man hit by two arrows. He's hit by an arrow and then another one. The first one is what life throws at you, the first arrow. Old age, disease, death, and all sorts of big and small problems that life throws at you, which causes pain and suffering. That's the first arrow. The second arrow is our reaction to it. And how we react to it, the Buddha says most of our pain is there. How we react to it. Because clearly that's a very acute observation. We see two patients, one with serious illness, maybe with calmness and dignity, one with a minor problem, completely losing it. Who is suffering more?
Yeah.
The one who is losing it is suffering more.
Yeah.
So our reaction, that causes the most proximate intense suffering.
Yeah.
And the Buddha said, what I have taught you will remove the suffering of that second arrow. And the first arrow I cannot do anything about. Of course, the whole Buddhist teaching is once you attain nirvana, that first arrow also is gone. So this is the nature of spiritual teachings. All spiritual teachings, including non-dual teachings, they work on the second arrow. So in the midst of the suffering imposed by the material world and our biological selves, in the midst of that, can you genuinely transcend suffering through spirituality? That's the precise contribution of all spirituality and non-duality particularly.
Thank you. And I'd say it is indeed, it's that second arrow, which is call it an over-identification with the world of appearances, right? It would be sitting in a horror movie and thinking that it's really inflicted upon you, whereas an enlightened state would be to realize I'm sitting here comfortably in a chair and it's just a movie playing. And what I find interesting about Advaita Vedanta when compared to other traditions is that the way to realize that it is indeed just that we are safe and we're just watching something and it is not really us. Many traditions would require either adhering to certain dogmas, following gurus, or altered states of consciousness. And now I think in the West, we've discovered, of course, how psychedelics can bring us there to that state. It's all good. But we all come down and we're back in our daily lives where we are immersed again. And Advaita Vedanta's proposition so to speak. I'm thinking back to you telling us that you had an MBA, right? Like the business proposition of Advaita Vedanta is to say this tradition can get you there by thought and reason. Could you tell us how exactly, like briefly? I know, of course, would require a long answer, of course.
All right. Yes. I remember a monk putting it very briefly, in Hindi he said, there are only two ways. Either you know it or you believe it. So he's trying to show us the uniqueness of the Advaita path. In Hindi he said, Jano ya mano. So either you know it or you believe it. Both will work. The way of belief is more well known. That's what religion is usually identified with, especially here in the West.
Yeah.
In America, for example, the name for religion is faith, which it's sort of taken implicitly. Religion means believing in something. But in India, it was seen that no, that's not the only way. There are different paradigms of being spiritual. If you have there's a conventional religion, of course, but we are talking about the spiritual quest to overcome suffering, to know reality. One way was, of course, the way of faith, the way of God and scripture and faith and believe in it, and the higher power will give you that realization. Pursuit is still that, but that enlightenment, but that comes from the higher power, from God, and that's perfectly valid. But the problem with that is it depends on belief, and it becomes more and more difficult today. We shouldn't cut it down because the Hindu traditions are very, in one sense, very motherly, in the sense there is something for each child. So the mother cooks various kinds of food, and depending on what the child likes or what the child can eat or digest. And so the mother heart is, that works for this child. It may not at all work for you. So the way of belief. I remember there's a person who was talking to me about his religion. And it was a lot of myths and a lot of stories. But I saw, and to me, it was a lot of rubbish. But I saw how that person believed in it, how that person was fascinated by all those stories, and more importantly, how all of that faith was helping him transform his life, becoming a better person, a more controlled person, and a more disciplined person. Yes, with all the beliefs in afterlife, a heaven after death, and rewards and afterlife and all of that, which I find difficult to believe or subscribe to, and many people would. But I see how it works. And the mother art of Hinduism says, yes, there's a place for that too. But the problem is, if you are thinking, if you are asking questions, then that it's very difficult to subscribe to that. So the second paradigm of spirituality is the path of mystical experience. It says you don't have to believe. Experience will show you the truth of the claims of religion. Vivekananda said, if religion is realization, the religion, if God exists, I should be able to see God. If I have an immortal soul, I should be able to feel it. And so you might call it the yogic paradigm. We are told that you don't have to believe. You practice these meditative exercises. You sit in this way, breathe in this way, focus and visualize, and you will have certain mystical experiences, extraordinary, not ordinary, extraordinary experiences, which will prove to you the truths about these claims. And that was the way of the yogis. And, of course, mystics in every religion. But that also can be questioned. It has been questioned. Mystics were always regarded as crazy people. Or today, neuroscience will say, I know you think you're seeing light, but it's just because there's a tumor in your brain, and, or because you have taken a psychotropic substance or something. So it can be doubted. One reason it's doubted is because those experiences are not public experiences. Like Hume said, the extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And religious claims seem to have very little proof, let alone extraordinary. They make extraordinary claims, but with very little proof. Moving on to the non-dual path, Advaitic path, here it's a different paradigm. It's not a belief paradigm. It's not even an extraordinary experience paradigm. Advaita actually takes philosophy very seriously. Advaita says enlightenment can be obtained through philosophy, through philosophical inquiry, by the sheer force of intellect and reason. Not that you can argue your way to enlightenment, but you can come very, very close to it. And so that's the way of Advaita Vedanta. It doesn't require us to believe in anything. In fact, it requires us to understand. It doesn't require extraordinary experiences, It always confines itself to experiences which are common to everybody. It starts with that. And step by step, it aims to point out something which it claims it's already available to us in experience. It works on shifting our paradigm, our framework of how we see ourselves and the universe. That's how Advaita Vedanta works.
And that, I think, is also why, having watched sort of conversations between you and Bernardo Kastrup, it's just not even, at least it's not a debate or a discussion, because there's so much similarity between that and sort of the analytic approach of idealism coming from, for instance, Bernardo's work. And I would find it nice to see if we can touch upon that, also find the differences. If we think of universal mind that dissociates itself into a form of consciousness, being Hans here, in Advaita Vedantic terms, that would be Brahman through a process. And correct me if I'm wrong, I just find it so fascinating. The eye maker, I think if it translates to Ahamkara, which leads to Jiva, right? My ego consciousness. But then also, in that process of Brahman doing all of this, we get sort of the world,
Yes.
Jagat,
Yes.
and also the deities or God. And that is something different, I think, at least from in Bernardo's work. But I'm so curious if you could just briefly sketch from us, okay, from Brahman, how do we get down to us sitting here and what the terms are, and also comparing it analytically to...
Yes, I was fascinated when I came across Bernardo's work. 2 books, one of his early books on criticism of materialism, and a more recent one on analytic idealism. The reason why I found it fascinating was, as you said, not only the parallels and the intersections with Advaita Vedanta, that you already have with some other ancient philosophies. Not surprisingly, they all came out of the same milieu.
Yeah.
So there is a very ancient Sankhya philosophy, which has a lot of similarities with Advaita. There are Buddhistic philosophies, like the emptiness school and the mind-only school, which have many similarities with Advaita Vedanta. And they all mutually criticize each other on the points of their difference. That's not so surprising. But here you have somebody who is coming from an entirely different perspective and is taking a fresh look at philosophy and science today, an independent, fresh look and penetrating look at science, and a revolutionary look at science, and seeing it. What appeals to the non-dualist, the Advaitin, would be the groundedness in experience.
Yeah.
And the boldness to follow experience and reason as far as they will go. And at the same time, not violating science, not contradicting already established mainstream science. So both in the old Advaita view and in Bernardo's view, scientific discoveries are preserved, and the field for scientific inquiry is still open. It's not dismissed. It's not, sometimes dualistic theories, dualistic religious theories, already make a claim about the world based on old texts, old theories, stories, and they go directly against modern scientific discoveries. And now the person in the path of faith in dualism has a choice, either to revise or update his belief system or to reject science. And often people reject science because the danger is, the fear for them is, because my very precious religious faith is based on a set of beliefs which are interconnected. If I let go a few of them, what's to say that my cherished beliefs in God and heaven, I don't have to let go of that also. It'll be shaken. The whole thing will be shaken. So we are driven to a position where even the things which are utterly ridiculous in the light of modern scientific discoveries, people tend to hold on to that and contradict science. Or you find a way of, in non-dualism also, a global approach to the universe as Maya, as appearance. So what happens there is that the non-dualist would say that, there's science and we accept all of that, but that's all appearance. The reality is Brahman, and it's all Maya. You can plug in your particular theory. It's compatible with everything. It's compatible with ancient cosmology. It's compatible with modern cosmology. It's compatible with quantum theory. It's compatible with the stories of primitive tribes, because it's all appearance. the reality is Brahman. I remember a physicist being shocked. He said he approached a traditional Vedanta teacher and told him that he's a physicist. And the Vedanta teacher said, "Oh, all that is Maya. You come to Advaita, I will show you the way to the truth." That again is not helpful. We live in a world of science. We are children of this age. We must find a way to work with, our most fundamental spiritual insights and modern science. That's what Bernardo does. And the resonances are so amazing that I have started using, with due credit to him, of course, arguments from his book on analytic idealism to show that what we are encountering are not independent material entities existing outside our conscious experience. Somehow, then we are conscious and we come into contact with these entities and they exist by themselves, external to consciousness. No. It is consciousness alone. The whole universe is experience, conscious experience.
Yeah.
And his precise analytic arguments to expose the underlying absurdity of the materialist claim. So they are so compatible with the ancient Advaitic things that I use them to supplement old arguments.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you asked about two things: the sentient being and the God question.
I find that interesting because it has that notion of Ishvara, right? There is a place still for divinity, so to speak, in Advaita Vedanta.
There, I can explain Advaita Vedanta's perspective. That's where Bernardo has a distinctly different perspective on Jiva, who we are. He brings in fact, concepts from psychiatry to show how the individual being arises. What happens in the Advaitic idea of the individual being, and from there to the cosmic being, the God of religion. Advaita Vedanta, as you said, the Ahamkara, the ego, it means the I maker, literally. Advaita has developed multiple models to show how this one background reality, limitless existence and consciousness, could become individual beings like us. So multiple models, 3 of those models I can say. They're just ways of trying to model what's going on. 2 of them are so-called reflection models. One is called limitation model. The reflection models are, imagine the reflection of the sun in the water or our face in the mirror, for example. So the appearance of mind, and there's a cosmological way in which bodies and minds and the universe appears. When the mind appears, consciousness is reflected in the mind along the lines of a face being reflected in the mirror. And then, just as we do not see our own face, we see the face in the mirror.
The reflection,
The reflection. And suppose we forgot our own face, then we would think, I am that face in the mirror. Similarly, the ego and consciousness, the conscious ego, there are 2 things there. I and consciousness together. The I is an activity of the mind, the ego is an activity of the mind, and there's a reflected consciousness in that. Think of the ego as the mirror. The mind itself is the mirror, but more precisely the ego itself as the mirror, and that catches the reflection of consciousness. So the ego, whenever the ego appears, it's always a conscious ego. It's a particular thought. I is a thought like any other thought, but it's also conscious. And from that conscious ego, the mind gets consciousness. From the mind, the sensory system is lit up by consciousness, and then we experience a world. So that's the reflection model. That's one way in which sentient beings come into existence. Pure consciousness, which we really are, the face, then the mirror of the mind or ego, and then the face reflected in the mirror, consciousness in the ego.
And just to clarify, the Ahamkara, the I maker process would be the consciousness forgetting that there's something else than just a mirror, just identifying with the reflection itself. Is that the
Not necessarily. What happens there is, in between it's like between our reality and the reflection, there appears an ignorance, which is why we are not aware of this. See, when we look at our faces in the mirror, it's not that we forget our faces. Day to day, when we go and brush my teeth or shave, I can see my face in the mirror and I know it's here. It's perfectly all right. That's the state of an enlightened person. So for an enlightened person also, the world appears, the body, everything goes on exactly the way it is. But in addition, the enlightened person is aware of the real face, not just the mirror and the... so that's all. That's the difference. So that is the ego, which catches the reflection of consciousness and then carries on. And somehow we have forgotten that I am the witness of the ego. I am the illuminer of the ego. I am not the ego. But thinking that I am the ego, thinking or absolutely identifying with the ego, the moment you identify with the ego, the moment you identify with the reflected face in the mirror, you are also identified with the mirror, because the reflected face is nothing but the mirror. The moment you're identified with the ego, you're identified with the mind. And the mind is identified with the body and the brain and everything, and then you become identified with the physical body. So this is the reflection theory. And there are two varieties of it, but we won't go into that. Here, there's a little bit of a problem, because you have in our minds, when I think of the face and the face reflected in the mirror, like there are two faces, It seems like that. There's one here and there's one there. And then the question becomes, how do I go from the reflected consciousness back to the real consciousness? And there's a process for that in non-duality, a philosophical investigation. The limitation model of how sentient beings arise, they don't go in for the reflection idea. I love the reflection idea because right here in Amsterdam you have these canals, and you can see Amsterdam reflected in the canals, and buildings and people and trees and sky. But the limitation model says, think of a window. And when we look through a window into the sky outside, the sky seems like little squares or triangles, depending on the lattices in the window, the grills in the window. And sometimes there are circles, then there's a triangle or a square, big and small. And the sky seems to be divided. The sky seems to be square or triangular or circular. The division in the sky is actually a division in the grills or the lattices in the window. The limitation of the size, the shape of the sky which you see, none of them are in the sky. They're imposed on the sky by the wind. But the beauty of this system is, when you look up through a window into the sky, you're actually seeing the real sky. Though it seems divided and with all sorts of shapes and all, you are in contact with the real sky. Exactly like that, the limitation model says, pure consciousness alone shines. And the mind seems to put like a window, a limitation on it. Seems to. It cannot actually limit. And so the consciousness we are experiencing right now is the pure consciousness. But it seems to be divided because of the fluctuations of the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the ideas, the I sense. These are all putting limitations on consciousness. So that's the difference. That's how a sentient being comes into existence. Now, from here to God, Ishvara, is just one step. That limitless consciousness, that sky, in one little window would be us. Each little window or part of a window would be us. But if you take the entire, suppose there's a whole wall of windows, all of it together, and the sky coming through all of those together. The sky identified with all the windows. The sky identified with the face reflected in all the mirrors. The one consciousness identified with all minds and bodies is what Vedanta would call Ishvara or God. And this is what we claim is the God of religions. So right now, you and I, we are pure consciousness, that same Brahman or Atman, that non-dual consciousness, but identified with one limiting set of body and mind. So we think, I am this. And Ishvara would exactly be that, with two crucial differences. Ishvara would be identified with all bodies and minds. So there's a claim, this is where faith comes in. There's a claim, just like there is a being, clearly there is a being who is conscious and yet also identified with one mind and one body. This is obvious to us because of our own experience. And so I can say there are others like me. At least in one case it has happened. I am here. So others look like me, so they also must be individual beings. But from there we jump to one more level, is that imagine a consciousness which is identified with all minds and all beings. This super being which considers the universe itself to be its body. And all minds connected to be its own mind, and beyond that also. That would be the God, that's the understanding of God in Vedanta.
And this is so interesting because it doesn't give an ontic ground to that God, because you still say the sky is what's ultimately real, fundamentally, which is Brahman, and it's not God. So in that sense, it would be, it's taking a step back. When you think about all world religions, right? In Christianity, you're taking a step back from Yahweh and saying the ground or Allah, and I find that interesting. But I'm curious at if does it have a function in Advaita Vedanta to then devote yourself in some sense to Ishvara, or is that just an in-between step that a pure enlightened being should skip, so to speak?
It's an in-between step. It's a helpful step. It explains religion. What's the connection between dualistic religions and non-duality? One way would be, they are all wrong. What they're talking about is just superstition. And here's the truth. We have the truth. But that's never been the way in India. And generally, it's been a very inclusive tradition. How do you work that into So from the non-dual perspective, what is it that they are doing, the dualistic schools? What they are doing is, they take themselves as individual beings, and they don't deconstruct themselves. They take themselves as consciousness, mind, body, this whole package, and then they project that universal consciousness as the God of their particular religion. That's what they're doing. And they stop there. Whereas Advaita Vedanta, what it says is, what you see through one window and what you see through the entire range of windows is literally the same sky, is exactly the same sky. This explains that the central teaching of Advaita Vedanta, you are that. So when Advaita says you are that, you point to one window and say you are that sky. We don't mean that little square of the sky. Moment you leave the window behind and go to the sky, it is the whole sky. It is, the sky itself is not limited by one little square of a window or 1,000 windows. It's just the limitless sky. Now, if you remain as the little sky shining through one window and you worship the huge sky shining through 1,000,000 windows, that's dualistic religion. What Advaita says there is, that's not wrong, because you're still referring, though indirectly, to the sky. To the sky. To that reality. So it's still perfectly all right. It should lead you at some point to transcend that.
Okay.
And you'll find in all the dualistic religions, staunchly dualistic religions, there's always a mystical or heretical or marginal non-dualism always there. In Christianity, it's there very much. Meister Eckhart, who was here, and many others. In Islam, it's there. In Judaism, it's there. And you've always had thinkers right here in Netherlands, like Spinoza.
Exactly.
Who, entirely on his own, came to a sort of non-dualism. Kind of, non-dual. Somebody, I don't know if it's true, Einstein was asked if you believe in God, and he said, I believe in Spinoza's God.
That's so nice. I was here in the Netherlands, and I think just briefly, so in Advaita Vedanta, there is place for worship in that sense, devotion to, for instance, Krishna, doing mantras, etc.
Yes, but it's very helpful.
Yeah.
It's not seen as superstitious or wrong, and it's very helpful because it develops the devotional side of a person's nature. See, psychologically, you can see why it's helpful. A problem in Advaita might be, I've seen it happen, it happens throughout the history of the tradition. One might intellectually grasp this amazing idea. It's a very liberating thought. You would expect the emotions also to follow along with it. And you would expect that person to be transformed into a fearless, because you can't die, as the sky doesn't die. The window might be broken, but the sky doesn't die. The mirror might be smashed, the sky doesn't die. You can switch off the movie, but the screen is still there. So you are basically immortal. Nothing can happen to you. Nothing affects you. So in that sense, so you can be fearless. You feel one with everybody, because literally you are all of them. They don't recognize what you are, what they truly are, but you recognize it. So you feel one with everybody. And from there you find the ultimate ground of ethics also. Why be truthful? Why be loving? Why be self-sacrificing? Why be altruistic? It's because the all is the real you. This limited one is as a superimposition. So the devotional worship of God as the all is very helpful because it purifies the emotions. Otherwise, what one can have is an intellectual appreciation of I am the non-dual consciousness, and still in day-to-day life behaving as the same old person. Because the emotions have not been purified, have not been sublimated. The most powerful way to sublimate the emotions is through devotion. So Advaita would not consider it absolutely essential, because there would be non-dualists, and there were throughout the tradition in centuries and millennia, who completely skipped, as you said, that part. There are texts also which completely skip it. They don't even mention God. But the original sources of the Vedanta, the Upanishads and all, they mention the attributeless absolute, the limitless sky. They also mention the absolute under limitations, which is one kind of limitation is us, the other kind of limitation is the cosmic being God. And so dualistic schools also emerged out of the matrix of the same texts. And so they got along pretty harmoniously.
And the difficulty I wouldn't say, but the challenge there, I think, for especially the Western rational mind, if we arrive indeed, as you say, intellectually at that notion, all is one, and pure intellectually we say, it doesn't make sense to harm you because fundamentally I'm harming myself.
Yes.
So, okay, great. You're there intellectually, and then indeed, as you mentioned, in our day-to-day life, sort of the monkey brain takes over, and we can get angry and even do violence to other people. So it needs to sink in. But I think for many people, the Bhakti notion of devotion and the devotional path, when it comes to especially deities, etc., is such a leap, because then again, the ratio kicks in and says, how can I commit to something? This is superstition, etc. So we're in search of, I'd say, a practice or a ritual that can fit in the West. And I'm just curious what Advaita Vedanta has to offer here for people watching this, saying, okay, I'm all par with analytic idealism. I just want it to more influence my daily life. What is it that they can do instead of sort of singing mantras to a deity, which you have said is a great way, but maybe for some people a step too far.
Yeah, right, especially today.
Yeah.
But never in history, as far as we know, there have been as many people who are agnostic or atheistic as there are today, and yet spiritual. There's a hunger for spirituality. Yeah. I remember reading this book, A History of Thought, by Jean-Luc Ferry. He's a French philosopher, but this is a general introduction to Western philosophy, and it became so popular apparently in France. It became translated into English, and I read that. And there he says, Western thought has gone through these 4 phases. There's the Greek phase, broadly speaking. Then there came the Christian phase, and then there came the Enlightenment phase, and now there is the postmodern phase.
Yeah.
And then at the end he says, if you ask me, which one would I prefer to adopt as the truth, which I personally would prefer, he would say undoubtedly it would be the Christian phase. However, the problem is, I can't believe today, after Enlightenment and after postmodernism today, where we are standing today, I can't believe all that stuff. That's what you're asking, basically. I'm going back
exactly.
It is very nice if it were true, but it's not true. It's I can't believe. I think this is where Advaita Vedanta and certain schools of Buddhism, they can and already are contributing. This is serious spiritual seekers turning to these Eastern philosophies over the last 100 years or so. It points to that phenomenon. There's a whole New Age phenomenon, that's a different thing, but there are serious seekers, and they find solace and insight in these paths. What these paths offer is this, that I'll tell you what they did traditionally, and today I'll tell you a brilliant new idea which is rooted in tradition, but is an innovation by Swami Vivekananda, which I think would really bring together some wonderful things. I think this is an answer to the cry which Jean-Luc Ferry is putting out there. Can you help me to believe in spirituality, but with all that we know right now.
Yeah.
That traditionally, if you look at the non-dualists in India, the Advaitins, they were a little bit of an outlier to Hinduism. In fact, philosophically, we were often, our opponents, the dualistic schools, often charged us with being Buddhists, hidden Buddhists. The Buddhists were the big enemies of the Hindus, and their big 1,000-year debate on the existence of the soul, on the existence of God, on epistemological, logical grounds, huge debates, and it led to an enormous development of sophisticated philosophy over 1,000 years. And our school was charged by other Hindu schools as being, you guys are actually Buddhists. Do you even believe in the deities? Do you take a dip in the holy Ganges? And our answer was, yes, we do all of that, except that we don't think it's the end. That's not the final point of it. That's part of the spiritual process. We agree all of those have value. And it does have. Psychological value, spiritual value. So not just devotion. For example, the yogic schools, the paths of meditation. There's another parallel debate between philosophical approach and the meditative approach. The yogis would charge us with, you guys talk a lot of interviews and talks and books, but you don't meditate enough. You don't have these experiences. And the charge from our side would be, if you're looking for knowledge, what's the point of just sitting quietly? You're not going to come to knowledge that way. Inquiry leads to knowledge. So this kind of debate was there. But the consensus was, even the yogic meditation was extremely helpful. The reason why it's difficult to grasp non-dualism, and once having grasped it, to center it and take benefit from it, is because the instrument we are using, the mind, is always in chaos. It's not been trained and disciplined. And so the yoga disciplines, the meditation disciplines are very helpful. The devotional bhakti disciplines are very helpful. The meditation disciplines are helpful in training and focusing the mind. The bhakti disciplines are helpful in purifying and sublimating the emotions. Both of these, a flickering mind and feelings, emotions, desires running riot, can wreck any philosophical quest, let alone a spiritual quest. It can wreck it. So that's why this is the traditional reason why bhakti was appreciated in Advaita Vedanta and is appreciated, and meditation also is appreciated in Advaita Vedanta and valued very much. Later Advaitic texts would incorporate all of this, keeping the proviso that there always were people who rejected all of them and said, pure philosophy, pure inquiry. That's always been there also. Now, new innovation. How do I worship without taking a leap of, because there is a leap of faith. I am consciousness in this body and mind, no leap of faith. Descartes saw that it's the one thing that is not refutable. It's absolutely sure. But what I just said, the same consciousness associated with all bodies and minds, with a universal being, there's still a big question of faith there. Is there such a being at all?
Yeah.
Now, the innovation, the startling innovation is this: it is there, and you're looking at it. That what you are looking at is that consciousness. If you really think that's real, that there's one limitless consciousness, where is it right now? It's you, of course, but it's also all sentient beings around you. You don't have to think of an extra-cosmic God in some extra-cosmic heaven with miraculous powers coming and going. That may be true, and I believe it is true, but I believe. But what we don't have to believe in, what is staring at us in our face all the time, are these billions of human beings, these billions of sentient beings. Who are they? Just as I am that non-dual reality, they are also that non-dual reality. And that non-dual reality in association with one body and mind is the individual I. In association with all bodies and minds, maybe the God of religion, but it's certainly all of humanity. It's certainly all of life. Now, can I worship humanity? Not in a humanitarian, not in a humanistic philosophical sense, but in an utterly spiritual sense, based on non-dual philosophy. And that's what Vivekananda said, his doctrine of spiritual service. So he put it in this language. The same service that we do, he put it in this language. My God the poor, my God the sick, my God the hungry, my God the ignorant, my God the wicked. These and others are the special object of my worship. He put it in another way. He says, the only God I believe in is the sum total of all human souls. So this tremendous consciousness, once they are not fragmented consciousnesses. Now we understand there is one non-dual consciousness. Now it is shining through us, through all beings, and it is not a matter of fate. We are confronted by society every day. We're confronted by human beings at all levels every day.
It really hits me because indeed, intellectually I can follow, and then emotionally it almost hits me.
Emotionally, yes.
It hits me because it feels so true.
One of the senior monks said, he says, if you look at it this way, then through persistent, disciplined service of that one non-dual consciousness shining in and through suffering humanity will come a great love. The service comes before the love. And as we start serving, treating the sick, educating the school, children in schools, helping people develop their economic condition, social condition, psychological condition, whoever they are, wherever they are, to take them and lift them up, whatever we can do for them. This sacrifice, this altruistic life of sacrifice, helping them to be better, express the divinity within more, this develops a great love for humanity, a love for that one consciousness in all beings. And this is maybe a different kind of bhakti.
Yeah.
And you're at all times dealing with reality. At no point are you stepping away from reality. And then service becomes spirituality. Vivekananda got this from his guru, Sri Ramakrishna. He would give these little sayings. Once Sri Ramakrishna, in an ecstatic mood, he said, not compassion. Who are you to show compassion? Rather, worship. Worship Shiva by serving Jiva. Shiva is that non-dual consciousness.
And Jiva is
Jiva is Shiva.
Yeah.
But appearing as Jiva.
Yeah.
Appearing as Vivekananda said, the poor, the sick, the ignorant, the wicked. It is all Shiva.
Even the wicked.
Even the wicked.
And interestingly, this is, of course, I have a Christian upbringing. Of course, in the Bible, Jesus, what's the parable of Jesus saying, I don't know you because I was that poor man knocking at your door and you didn't
Literally.
open. Exactly. So there is this notion then, and Swamiji, I'm fascinated by the Bhagavad Gita coming from a Christian background with a much more, almost in the Orthodox tradition, Dutch Protestant tradition. I'm brought up an ontological good and evil, right? That's my upbringing. And I struggled with that because I couldn't uphold it intellectually. I see good and evil as a reality on our relative plane, and we have to deal with that. So, and the Bhagavad Gita to me is so rich, but also so paradoxical, of course, because in that story we have a prince who is troubled deeply by having to maybe commit violence on a battlefield. And he has the counsel of God, of Krishna, who at some moment says, you just have to do it. And that to me is so paradoxical, like the God saying, I have to commit violence here. I'm just curious there on how you regard that or your reflection on what I'm saying here. And also if all of us in some degree have that counsel of Krishna, not in the sense that we have to believe again in a deity, but some counsel of our higher self, our Atman, who can guide us.
Yes. One is, the way I understand Krishna's counsel there.
Oh, by the way, you want to? I'll just pour you in that.
Yes, a little bit of water.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you. The way I understand Krishna's advice to Arjuna there, what strikes us is, here is God telling the prince to go and fight a war. But that's not the point. The reason the Gita has inspired millions of Hindus across generations, centuries and millennia is not because somebody fought a war. That would have no relevance to the lives of ordinary Hindus. The point there is, even to be spiritual, even to be a non-dualist, you have to engage with life. This idea runs through the teachings of all great masters throughout the ages. Krishna says to Arjuna, the whole sum total of his advice is, Be centered in me and fight the battle of life. One might think, this and, why this and? One could as well fight the battle of life, do one's duty in life, and forget God and all of that. Or be centered in God and forget this.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thinking that non-duality means that you are making a mistake. You think that this world is other than that non-dual reality. You're looking for spirituality, God, the self, the absolute, and you say, I'm going to ignore all this.
Yeah.
But you can't. If the absolute is a non-dual reality, if it's really infinite, limitless, then it is not limited by the world. The world must be in some sense that absolute. So look at how Krishna says that you have to be centered in the divinity and fight the battle of life. That and is there. Come thousands of years later to Jesus Christ when they ask him, what is the most important commandment? Remember, the old religion, the Jews, was a religion of commandments. So naturally the question, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus, very interestingly, he says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy might. And you might say, yeah, that's great. But he says, and. He adds, and love thy neighbor. He could have stopped there. He said, love God with all thy might. That's it, done. That's one commandment. It's in the Torah. So that's good. Stop there. No. And. So he says, equally important. And I look at it from non-duality and see that if you had not done that and, it would have violated non-duality. You come down to, so when you see what Sri Ramakrishna is telling, serving Jiva is worship of Shiva. It's that same non-duality.
Yeah.
The motto which Vivekananda gave our monastic organization for one's enlightenment and for the welfare of the world. Notice, we think there are two goals, but they're not two goals. Vivekananda would say, actually, the deeper meaning of this is we are doing only one thing. When you work for your enlightenment and you serve humanity, work for the good of the world, you are basically worshipping that same non-dual reality.
And do you think that Jiva, the ego consciousness that we are, has a deep meaning and value to it that Brahman on the highest level does not have? And I'm referring here also to in Bernardo's work, the universal mind, which does not have a metacognition, or it cannot feel what we feel. Or what opened my thinking here is the story of Job in the Bible that you must know of suffering, right? The deep question of suffering. And where I read the book by Carl Gustav Jung, who analyzes that story in the sense that what Job experienced, the deep suffering, is something that Yahweh in that story, who somehow inflicts it on Job. I mean, he permits it, right? It's all happening under his eyes. Cannot himself experience. So he needs Job to sort of reflect back at him, like, what are you doing to me? This is not okay. And then Jung's analysis was that led eventually in the Bible to the incarnation of Christ coming to the earth, to wanting to experience it himself. Yes. So in Advaita Vedanta, the value of Jiva and also the value of not escaping reality as it is, me, my body sitting here, the true value of that, not something to be escaped or having to reach an enlightened state. I'm just so curious what your thoughts are here.
You're right. If you go back to the sources of Vedanta in the Upanishads, the question is, how does the one become the many, or why does it become the many, or does it at all become the many?
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Why is something rather than nothing? That one has to be, is absolute, that cannot not exist. It's a necessary existence. Yeah. It is existence itself. But what about existent things? Why did that one become the universe and living beings and one? The answer, the Upanishads start with that one, as it were, reflecting, I am one, I shall be many. And so there's a primal impulse there to appear as the many. It's like, what good is existence itself if there are no existing things? What good is consciousness itself if there are no conscious experiences? What good is this absolute bliss unless there is joy and suffering? So the absolute is the counterpart of the manifestation. But in the manifestation, you have this tremendous diversity. Now, if you take just the manifestation itself, take this and you forget the absolute, then there is no way out. then it becomes a world of, it becomes terrible, because the problem of evil becomes insoluble. What about death? All of those things, extremely serious and no solution. Whereas if you bring in spirituality and very rationally the non-dual approach to it, you have a rational answer to these questions. None of it is escapism. So if you actually look at the lives of the enlightened one, the saints of all religions, none of them escaped suffering. Sometimes they suffered terribly, much more than us. And yet they somehow transcended suffering. There are those who suffer miserable and die. And that kind of suffering just brutalizes. But there is this other, the saint, the avatar, the enlightened one. In Vedanta it's called free while living. So free while jivan mukta. While living means you are embodied. There is a world. You have a life. And yet you're free. That is the most extraordinary spiritual attainment. So you're grounded in the reality and yet facing life. And that is amazing. For yourself, and you become a blessing for yourself and for everybody else around you.
And it is here right now. It is not something that in an ideal situation to escape the wheel of suffering, we don't want to get back into these lives, not getting back in another movie for life. I'm curious here also because I think many people who are in the West more familiar with Buddhism see sort of the self as an illusion fundamentally and the source of all suffering. So the self, the jiva, is something to be escaped fundamentally. At least that's the reading many people have. And I'm curious if Advaita Vedanta in that sense departs there and say, no, it's here right now and the bliss, it's okay as it is, so to speak, in a sense.
Yes. And even Buddhism, at least some of the schools of Buddhism is a wide spectrum of views.
Of course, yeah.
In Tibetan Buddhism, the emptiness school, the final synthesis that they have come to right now, and over the last few hundred years, from Tsongkhapa downwards. See what His Holiness the Dalai Lama would teach and the Gelug monks would teach, is very much similar to what Advaita Vedanta says. It is right here. Notice the Buddha himself. So he says suffering is old age and disease and death, and there is a release from suffering. But the Buddha himself, after enlightenment, clearly he lived in life. He became old, he got disease, and he did die. So those things he kept on experiencing. And yet the claim is that he transcended suffering. That would be the spiritual goal. Not an anesthesia, which won't let you feel suffering at all, but you feel life maybe more than others. And yet in the middle of it all, while suffering, while experiencing life, you're still fine. I mean, it would be a very strange, going back to the movie example you started with, it would be a boring and a kind of useless movie screen which didn't play any movies. You say, movies are trouble, switch them all off. No. You have a screen and you're playing the movie. That's fine. You are conscious, you are this absolute consciousness and you're having conscious experiences. So grounded in that transcendent non-dual realization and living life, there's no choice actually. Either one can be enlightened or not be, can be spiritual, not be spiritual. Not be spiritual, here's life, face it. And somebody said that my teenage daughter said, you have both suffering and enjoyment in life. You don't complain about the enjoyment, so take the suffering when it comes. Why all this thing about, why is there suffering? How can we overcome suffering? And the gentleman said to me, I didn't know what to say to her. I said, she's a child. She has not seen suffering. I mean, let's pray that she does not, but you can't say to the parents who have lost a child, you can't say to them, well, when you had the child, you are happy, you accepted the happiness without any questioning. Now you have lost the child, so accept the loss of the child without question. No. Right here, when I walk down the streets here in Amsterdam, you come across these little labels on the ground that here lived this Jewish couple.
The Second World War.
And they were dragged away from this house. And it says, not only sent to that Auschwitz or Treblinka, they were murdered on such and such date there. You can't say that, don't complain about it. No. Suffering is a serious question.
Yeah.
Serious question. You can't tell a person who's suffering, who's sick, who is miserable, who is oppressed. You can't say that it's okay. You like enjoyment, so it
Yeah.
takes the suffering also.
And
No.
and there's no all-knowing, almighty Brahman that inflicts all of this willfully on us,
No.
right? That's not the
In fact, if it's there, you are it.
Wow.
So,
If
Sri Ramakrishna was once asked that, so there are these different levels of answers. Was asked, why is there, if God exists, why is there so much suffering? So many millions and millions suffer, innocents suffer, helpless people, and then animals in the world also suffer. There's no way out for that. Life itself seems to be inflicted with suffering, pervaded by suffering. And his answer was, well, it is the play of God. Can we know what can we do? And the person who asked the question was not at all satisfied. He said, it might be the play of God. There's a Sanskrit term for it, lila,
Yeah.
the play of the divine. It might be the play of the divine. It's death for us. We suffer. It is agony for us. What kind of play is that? So the final answer which Ramakrishna gives is, and who are you? We don't even know who we are. The non-duality would say that investigate who you are. Then you will come to the realization that which is manifesting as this world and life and suffering is you in depth.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And a final question to you, Swamiji. I very much thank you so much for this wonderful conversation already. But a final question for people watching who might experience sort of deep distress or suffering, and I know I haven't had that much suffering in my life, but I know in those moments it is very natural to seek for answers outside oneself, right? Whether it's religion or psychotherapy or whatever. And it seems to me, sort of to summarize our whole conversation, that it can be found directly within, in a sense. But what's a first step? And getting back to also that question on if we all have sort of that access to Krishna, as the Bhagavad Gita tells us about, that Arjuna has that counsel of God there. And of course, that's its story. But what's the first step for people to experience counsel like that within?
Yes. One thing is to note that suffering is inevitable. Everybody suffers. For the first step, when I recognize that the universality of suffering, the death visits everybody. Sickness, loss visits everybody throughout history and now, and including me and people in the future. Always, it'll happen. That itself broadens the suffering mind. That, oh, so I see this is an impersonal phenomenon. Then the second, and gives us great sympathy for others, because now I'm actually feeling what they're feeling. And then notice all those therapies take help. Whether it is therapy or counseling or meditation or devotion, all of them point it back to you. Even the reliance on a supreme power, which can be a great consolation, especially in hard times. That's one of the powers of the Bhakti traditions, devotional traditions. It's very hard to do it by yourself. You feel I am this one little being.
Yeah.
No matter how intelligent, how philosophical you are, or how meditative one is, how great one's spiritual attainments, it's still very small compared to the universe and the weight of the universe. What we require is this cosmic being, this tremendous power by our side. And that's what Bhakti promises. Take our help of that. That works too. Jung himself, he said, I've seen past middle age, most of the crises people face can be traced back to a divorce between them and their church. The divorce of faith.
Yeah.
And there is so bhakti, devotion, this universal sympathy for all suffering beings, that itself is an alleviation of suffering. Then the stillness of mind. Many people don't understand this simple insight that we think my mind is restless and full of suffering because the world, samsara, is inflicting all this on me. I have a restless mind because the world is throwing problems at me. The yogi will say that this problematic world is there because of your restless mind, not the other way around. The more still our minds, the more quiet and inward our minds, the less the suffering will be. Although suffering doesn't go away, it deepens it. There is a meditative quality to suffering also. It stills and makes us serious. And then finally, this non-dual knowledge, this philosophical knowledge of the oneness of all existence. So it does not deny suffering, just as it does not deny science. Yeah. And you can experience the suffering and shed tears too, and at the same time, even deeper than that suffering, deeper than those tears, you can say, yes, there is a place of peace, bliss, which is eternal. It's there, an eye in the hurricane, an eye of the hurricane, a place of calm in the middle of the hurricane.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, Swamiji.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this interview. If you have comments, questions, please share them below. We will also put links. There are so many great videos of you. We will link to that. We'll link to the Vedanta Society of New York. So there are just many Q&As that you can watch with Swami Sarvapriyananda to enrich sort of your knowledge of Advaita Vedanta and how to bring it into practice. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I see you in one of our next episodes.